The night embraced the Okefenokee swamp in a cloak of darkness so complete that even the moon's silver touch couldn't penetrate its depths. Mist hung over the black waters, rising like ghostly sentinels among the cypress trees. The mercenaries moved with practiced precision, their night vision equipment cutting through the darkness, transforming the swamp into an eerie green landscape. The squad leader raised his fist, bringing the formation to a halt. 6 men in tactical gear, armed with Russian-made weapons and American military training. Former Special Forces operators, now working for the highest bidder. Their confidence was palpable as they communicated through hand signals spreading out to secure the perimeter. "Thermals clear," whispered the point man, scanning the surroundings. "No heat signatures." The squad leader nodded, his face partially hidden behind tactical gear. "Keep moving. Extraction point is half a click northeast." They had completed their mission, reconnaissance of a potential drop site, and were now heading back to base camp. Their employer would be pleased. The swamp's isolation made it perfect for their operation. No witnesses, no interference, and certainly no resistance. The crack of a high-powered rifle shattered the night's silence. The point man dropped without a sound, a perfect shot through his temple. Before the others could react, a second shot rang out, and another mercenary fell. "Contact!" The squad leader shouted, diving for cover behind a cypress knee. "Find them!" The remaining men scattered, taking defensive positions, firing blindly into the darkness. Their muzzle flashes illuminated the swamp in strobing bursts of light, but hit nothing but trees and water. Another shot. Another man down. "You can't hide here," one of the mercenaries shouted into the darkness, panic edging his voice. "We'll find you." The squad leader activated his thermal imaging scope, desperately scanning the surrounding trees and water. Nothing. Whoever was out there knew how to mask their heat signature. A professional. The fourth shot came from a completely different direction. The mercenary to his left crumpled, falling face first into the murky water. Now only 2 remained. Back to back, they fired in controlled bursts, sweeping their weapons across the swamp. Their training kept the fear at bay, but just barely. They were being hunted. "Command, this is Recon 1. We're under fire. Multiple casualties. Request immediate." The radio transmission ended abruptly as a bullet found the squad leader's throat. The last mercenary standing watched in horror as his commander fell, clutching at his neck as blood poured between his fingers. Alone now, the mercenary fired wildly in all directions, emptying his magazine into the darkness. "Show yourself!" he screamed, his composure shattered. In the sudden silence that followed, he heard it, the soft splash of water. Spinning around, he raised his weapon only to find the magazine empty. As he fumbled to reload, a figure rose from the swamp not 20 feet away. Covered in mud and swamp vegetation, the figure was barely distinguishable from the environment. Only the unwavering barrel of a sniper rifle gave it away as human. As the mercenary finally seated a new magazine, the dark figure spoke, a woman's voice, calm and cold. "You're trespassing." The last sound the mercenary heard was the deafening crack of a rifle at close range. The figure stood motionless for a long moment, surveying the carnage with calculating eyes. Then, as silently as she had appeared, she melted back into the swamp, becoming one with the darkness. 72 hours earlier, morning light filtered through the dusty windows of Mitchell's hunting supplies, illuminating shelves stocked with ammunition, hunting rifles, fishing gear, and survival equipment. The store wasn't large, but it was comprehensive, a testament to the owner's understanding of what worked in the wilderness surrounding Folkestone, Georgia. Vanessa Mitchell ran a cleaning cloth along the barrel of a Remington hunting rifle. At 38, She possessed a beauty that turned heads despite her deliberate efforts to downplay it. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, her face free of makeup. She wore simple jeans and a plaid button-up with the sleeves rolled to the elbows, revealing toned forearms and a long, jagged scar that ran from her right wrist nearly to her elbow. The bell above the door jingled, and Vanessa looked up, her eyes quickly assessing the elderly man who entered. The tension in her shoulders eased immediately. "Morning, Frank," she said, setting aside the rifle. "Coffee's fresh." Colonel Frank Hargrove, retired, nodded appreciatively as he made his way to the counter. At 72, he moved with the measured grace of a man who had spent his life in military service. His weathered face bore the lines of someone who had seen too much, yet his blue eyes remained sharp and alert. "Thought I'd check in before heading to the range," he said, accepting the mug Vanessa offered. "Weather report says we've got clear skies until Thursday. Perfect conditions." What customers saw was a friendly relationship between a shopkeeper and a regular. Perhaps a father figure or uncle. What they didn't see was the subtle scan Frank performed of the store's layout, the way his eyes checked corners and exits, old habits from decades in Delta Force. "I've got that new scope you wanted to try," Vanessa said, reaching below the counter and producing a boxed Schmidt & Bender PMTY 52556. German engineering at its finest. Zero thermal drift, first focal plane reticle, and waterproof to 15 meters. Frank's eyes lit up as he examined the precision instrument. "They've come a long way since my days in Berlin." He looked up with a knowing smile. "Remember what we used behind the Iron Curtain Soviet-made PSO-1 scopes taken off Dragunov rifles? Primitive compared to this, but they got the job done." Vanessa nodded, understanding the layers beneath his casual reminiscence. Frank rarely spoke about his Cold War operations to anyone else, but with her, he occasionally shared fragments of a past that most Americans would never know existed. "How about we give it a proper test this afternoon?" she suggested. "I've set up some new targets at the back property. 1,000-yard range." A customer might have missed the significance of this casual invitation, but both understood what it meant. 1,000 yards wasn't a hunting range, it was a military sniper's training ground. Frank nodded. "I'd like that. Been too long since I've pushed past 800. The bell jingled again as a young deputy sheriff entered, nodding politely to both of them. "Ms. Mitchell, Colonel, beautiful morning." "Deputy Collins," Frank acknowledged. "How's Sheriff Reeves doing with that new deputy from Atlanta?" Deputy Collins rolled his eyes slightly. "Still breaking him in. City folks don't understand our ways out here." The three exchanged pleasantries for a few minutes before Collins purchased some ammunition and left. When the door closed behind him, the easy smile faded from Vanessa's face. "You heard anything more about those strangers asking questions at the diner?" she asked quietly. Frank's expression darkened. "Russians, according to May at the diner. Though they speak perfect English, they're asking about property around the swamp claiming to be developers." "Developers don't carry Makarov pistols under their jackets," Vanessa replied. Frank raised an eyebrow. "You've seen them." "Briefly. They drove past here yesterday, slowed down, took photos." Her voice remained calm, but her eyes had hardened. "Black SUV tinted windows, government plates that didn't match any official registry when I ran them." Frank nodded, understanding her meaning. Vanessa wouldn't have access to official vehicle registries unless she still had contacts in military intelligence. "Think it's connected to what happened in Syria?" he asked. Vanessa's hand unconsciously moved to the scar on her arm. "I don't know. It's been 4 years. If they wanted me, they've had time." Frank sipped his coffee thoughtfully. "I'll make some calls." Still have a few friends at Langley who owe me favors from the old days." The conversation paused as another customer entered. Vanessa seamlessly shifted back into her role as the helpful shopkeeper, but her eyes never stopped moving, cataloging details, assessing threats. It was instinctive now, as natural as breathing. After closing the shop, Vanessa drove her weathered Ford F-150 down the winding dirt road that led to her home. Located 3 miles from the nearest neighbor, the modest cabin sat on 10 acres of land that backed directly onto the vast Okefenokee swamp. To casual observers, it appeared to be a simple if isolated dwelling, perfect for someone who valued privacy. What those observers would never see were the security measures invisible to the untrained eye: motion sensors, disguised as ordinary landscaping features, strategically positioned cameras with thermal capabilities, and reinforced walls that could withstand small arms fire. Vanessa parked beside the cabin and retrieved her groceries from the truck bed. As she approached the front door, she paused, noticing the slightest disturbance in the dirt path. A footprint that wasn't hers or Frank's. Someone had approached her home while she was away. Instead of entering through the front, she circled around to a side entrance, groceries still in hand, appearing casual, while her senses heightened to full alert. Once inside, she set down the bags and moved silently to a panel hidden behind a bookshelf. A quick sequence of buttons revealed a small monitor displaying feeds from the hidden cameras. She rewound the footage, watching as a black SUV, the same one she'd seen driving past her shop, had parked at the edge of her property 3 hours earlier. 2 men had emerged, surveying the cabin from a distance before returning to their vehicle. They hadn't approached closer, perhaps deterred by the isolation or sensing the security measures. Vanessa closed the panel and moved to another hidden compartment beneath the floorboards of her bedroom closet. The trapdoor revealed a small arsenal: her modified Mk-13 Mod 7 sniper rifle, the standard-issue weapon for Navy SEALs, several handguns, and boxes of ammunition. She selected a SIG Sauer P226, checking it methodically before securing it in a holster at the small of her back. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across her property, Vanessa sat on her porch, with a glass of bourbon, appearing relaxed while remaining vigilant. The swamp stretched before her, a vast wilderness that most people feared or avoided. For her, it had become a sanctuary. Her phone vibrated with a text message from Frank. "Company coming, 0800 tomorrow. Old friend." Vanessa understood immediately. Frank was bringing someone he trusted, someone from his past. She replied with a simple "Roger that," and put the phone away, her gaze returning to the darkening swamp. In the distance, an owl called out its haunting cry, echoing across the water. Vanessa took another sip of bourbon, letting the familiar burn center her thoughts. The peaceful life she had carefully constructed over the past 4 years was about to change. She could feel it coming, like the pressure drop before a storm. That night, sleep eluded Vanessa. As she lay awake, memories surfaced, memories she had worked hard to suppress. Afghanistan 2019, Operation Phantom Spear. The mission had been classified at the highest levels, a surgical strike against a high-value target in a remote compound near the Pakistan border. As the designated sniper for SEAL Team 6's Alpha Squad, Vanessa "Ghost" Mitchell had positioned herself on a ridge overlooking the target area, providing overwatch for the assault team. Through her scope, she watched the operation unfold with clinical precision. When unexpected reinforcements arrived, threatening to overwhelm her team, Vanessa had remained calm, methodically, eliminating threats one after another. 12 confirmed kills in less than 15 minutes. A record that earned her both commendations and whispered unease among some of her male counterparts. "Ghost sees all ghost fears none" had been her team's unofficial motto. The memory shifted to the aftermath, the debriefing, where her commander had pulled her aside. "Mitchell, what you did out there?" Captain Reynolds had struggled with his words. "I've never seen anything like it. Not in 20 years." Vanessa had simply nodded, uncomfortable with the attention. "Just doing my job, sir." "Well, your job just set a new standard. 12 targets, all headshots in varying wind conditions with multiple moving targets." Reynolds had shaken his head in disbelief. "The boys are calling you the Ghost for a reason. You're damn near supernatural with that rifle." The memory faded, replaced by a darker one. Her final mission in Syria 2020. The mission that had ended her military career and claimed the lives of her entire team, except for her. Vanessa sat up in bed, her breathing controlled despite the cold sweat on her skin. She wouldn't allow herself to relive that day fully. Not tonight. Instead, she rose and moved to the window, looking out at the swamp bathed in moonlight. 4 years of building a new identity, of becoming Vanessa Mitchell, the reclusive shopkeeper. 4 years of quiet vigilance, knowing that someday someone might come looking for her. Whether it was the enemies she'd made during her service or the ghosts of her past, she had always known this peace was temporary. She closed her eyes, centering herself with the breathing techniques she'd learned in Bud's training, the brutal selection process for Navy SEALs. When she opened them again, her gaze was clear and focused. If trouble was coming, she would be ready. Frank Hargrove arrived precisely at 0800 the next morning, accompanied by a man Vanessa didn't recognize. She watched them approach from her porch, noting how Frank walked slightly ahead. A subtle signal that he was vouching for his companion. "Vanessa!" Frank called out as they approached. "This is Mike Reeves, former SEAL, now private security. Served with Team 4 until 2018. Vanessa assessed the newcomer with a practiced eye. Around 46 foot, powerfully built, with the compact muscle of someone who prioritized function over appearance. His eyes scanned the property in the same way hers would, looking for threats, escape routes, defensive positions. "Ma'am," Mike nodded respectfully. "Colonel Hargrove speaks highly of you." "Does he now?" Vanessa replied, her tone neutral as she led them inside. "Coffee's in the kitchen. I assume this isn't a social call." Once they were seated at her kitchen table, Frank placed a manila folder between them. "Mike came to me yesterday with some information I think you need to see." Inside the folder were surveillance photos of the black SUV Vanessa had spotted, along with clear images of the men inside. Accompanying the photos were documents, some redacted, bearing CIA and NSA letterheads. "Viktor Zakharov," Mike explained, pointing to a man in one of the photos. "Former KGB, then FSB after the Soviet collapse. Officially, he retired 15 years ago to become a businessman. Unofficially, he's built one of the largest weapons trafficking networks in the world." Vanessa studied the man's face. Late 60s, silver hair with the cold eyes of a predator. "What's his interest in a Georgia swamp?" Frank and Mike exchanged glances before Frank continued. 2 months ago, intelligence picked up chatter about a major arms deal happening somewhere along the Georgia-Florida border. Nothing concrete enough for official action, but enough to raise flags. "And this concerns me because—" Vanessa kept her expression neutral, though she already suspected the answer. Mike leaned forward. "Because one of Zakharov's known associates was identified in Damascus in 2020, coordinating with the cell that ambushed your SEAL team." The words hung in the air like smoke. Vanessa's face remained impassive, but her knuckles whitened slightly around her coffee mug, the only visible sign of the impact this news had made. "We believe Zakharov was behind the ambush," Frank said quietly. "Though we don't know why he targeted your team specifically." Vanessa set down her mug carefully. And now he's here, in my backyard. It could be coincidence, Mike offered, though his tone suggested he didn't believe it. There's more, Frank continued, pulling another document from the folder. This one bore a top-secret stamp and appeared to be an internal memo from a classified government agency. This was passed to me through channels I trust. Zakharov isn't just here for a standard weapons deal. He's brokering something called Project Chimera, a biological weapon developed by the Soviets during the Cold War. Vanessa took the document, quickly scanning its contents. Chimera was supposedly destroyed when the Soviet Union fell. Supposedly, Frank emphasized, but apparently someone preserved samples. According to this, it's a genetically modified version of anthrax that's resistant to all known treatments. One canister could devastate a major city. Why bring it through the Okefenokee? Vanessa asked. Remote difficult to monitor spans state lines, which complicates jurisdiction, Mike explained. Perfect for moving something you don't want found. The swamp's natural hazards discourage casual interlopers, and its size makes it nearly impossible to patrol effectively. They've established a base camp somewhere in the northern section, Frank added, unfolding a map of the swamp. We believe the handoff is scheduled for 3 days from now. Vanessa studied the map, her mind already calculating distances, routes, vantage points. And I assume official channels are moving too slowly, or there's concern about leaks. Frank nodded grimly. NSA intercepted communications suggesting Zakharov has assets inside several agencies. That's why this is off the books. So what exactly are you asking me to do? Vanessa's voice was measured, though she already knew the answer. Nothing you aren't uniquely qualified for, Frank replied. Nobody knows the swamp like you do. Nobody can do what you can do with a rifle. Vanessa stood, moving to the window that overlooked the swamp. For long moments, she said nothing, weighing the implications of what they were proposing. Finally, she turned back to them. If Zakharov is connected to Syria, he already knows I'm here. That's why his men have been surveilling my shop and my home. Her eyes hardened, which means I'm already involved whether I want to be or not. Frank nodded, understanding the shift in her demeanor. The shopkeeper was receding, and the soldier, the ghost, was emerging. I'll need intelligence on their numbers, equipment, and exact location, she said. And I want to know everything about Zakharov's security detail. Former Spetsnaz, I'm guessing. Good guess, Mike confirmed. His inner circle is ex-Russian special forces, plus some mercenaries with various backgrounds, former SEALs, gone rogue Delta operators who couldn't adjust to civilian life, that kind of talent. I have some of that information already, Frank said, and Mike has contacts who can get us more. Vanessa nodded, her decision made. We start tonight. Reconnaissance first, then we develop a plan based on what we find. As Frank and Mike prepared to leave, Vanessa retrieved her Mk-13 from its hidden compartment. The familiar weight of the weapon in her hands felt right, as though a part of her that had been dormant was awakening. Vanessa, Frank said from the doorway, his voice solemn, you should know. I've encountered Zakharov before. Berlin, 1988. A Soviet defector extraction that went bad. He paused, the memory clearly painful. He's not just good at what he does. He enjoys it. Vanessa met his gaze, understanding the warning. So do I, Frank. So do I. After they left, Vanessa began methodical preparations. She cleaned and checked her rifle, prepared her ghillie suit for swamp conditions, and gathered the specialized equipment she would need for operating in the treacherous environment. Each item was inspected with the meticulous attention of someone whose life had once depended on her gear functioning perfectly. As darkness fell, she dressed in tactical black, applied face paint in mottled patterns, and loaded her pack with essentials. The woman who emerged from the cabin bore little resemblance to the shopkeeper of Mitchell's hunting supplies. This was Ghost, the sniper who had become a legend among special operators. She melted into the swamp like a shadow moving with the silent confidence of someone returning to their element. Whatever Zakharov had planned, whatever connection he had to the tragedy in Syria, he had made a critical error by bringing his operation to her territory. The swamp was her domain now, and in the swamp, the Ghost was sovereign. The pre-dawn light cast an ethereal glow over the mist-covered swamp as Vanessa navigated her shallow draft boat through the narrow waterways. After 5 hours of careful reconnaissance, she had identified 3 patrol routes maintained by Zakharov's men, all converging on a small island deep within the northern section of Okefenokee. She killed the electric motor and let the boat drift into a dense stand of cypress trees, effectively concealing it from view. With practiced efficiency, she secured the craft and gathered her equipment: the Mk-13 rifle, a spotting scope, a tactical radio, and enough supplies to maintain her position for up to 72 hours if necessary. Moving through the swamp was an art form that few mastered. Every step had to be calculated, every sound controlled. Vanessa had spent 4 years learning the swamp's secrets, where the ground would support weight, which plants would betray movement, how to distinguish solid footing from deceptive bog that could swallow a person whole. She established her hide at the edge of a small rise that offered a clear view of the island, while providing excellent concealment. Using local vegetation to supplement her ghillie suit, she disappeared into the landscape, becoming just another feature of the swamp. Through her spotting scope, she counted 17 men on the island, all heavily armed with military-grade weapons. They had established a sophisticated camp with satellite communications generator power and what appeared to be a landing zone for small aircraft. In the center of the camp stood a reinforced container that could only be a secure storage facility. Vanessa documented everything, taking mental notes on guard rotations, equipment, and vulnerabilities. She identified Zakharov himself, the silver-haired man from the photos, emerging from a central tent that clearly served as the command post. For 6 hours, she remained perfectly still, observing the operation with the patience of a professional hunter. When she finally withdrew, she had a comprehensive understanding of what they were facing, and it was formidable. Upon returning to her cabin, she found Frank and Mike waiting. The 3 gathered around her kitchen table as she detailed her findings. 17 men on site, all with military training based on their movements and discipline, she reported. Perimeter security includes motion sensors and what looked like anti-personnel mines at key approach points. They're expecting company, but not necessarily hostiles. Weapons? Mike asked. Russian primarily. AK-12s, SVD Dragunov marksman rifles, at least 2 PKP Pecheneg machine guns. I also spotted what looked like a man-portable air defense system, probably an SA-24 Grinch. Frank whistled. They're expecting serious resistance, or planning to take down an aircraft. The landing zone suggests they're receiving a delivery by air, Vanessa continued. Based on activity patterns, I'd estimate it's happening tomorrow night around 2200 hours. That doesn't give us much time, Mike observed. It gives us enough, Vanessa replied, her confidence evident. But we need to deal with a more immediate problem first. She pulled out her phone and showed them a photo she'd taken earlier that day. This was on my shop door this morning. The image showed a typed note: selling property has become urgent. Last offer, $500,000. Next offer, not as friendly. They're moving faster than we anticipated, Frank said grimly. They're trying to establish a cover story, Vanessa explained. Buy land, create a legitimate front for what's happening in the swamp. When I didn't jump at their first offer, they escalated. You need to be careful, Mike warned. If Zakharov knows who you are, he doesn't. Vanessa interrupted. Not yet. Otherwise, they wouldn't be bothering with offers. They'd have come directly for me. The conversation was interrupted by Vanessa's phone ringing. It was Deputy Collins from the Sheriff's Department. "Ms. Mitchell," his voice was strained. "There's been an incident. Colonel Hargrove's house. There was a fire. The colonel's been taken to Folkestone Memorial. It's bad, ma'am." Vanessa's expression didn't change, but her eyes met Frank's across the table. "I'll be right there." "Thank you, Deputy." After ending the call, she relayed the information. Frank's face darkened with rage. "This is on me," he said. "I made some calls yesterday, reached out to old contacts. Someone must have been monitoring." "Or your contacts aren't as trustworthy as you thought," Mike suggested. Vanessa was already moving, checking her handgun and grabbing her keys. "We'll sort that out later. Right now we need to get to the hospital. If they went after Frank, they might go after the colonel too." The drive to Folkestone Memorial Hospital took 20 minutes. 20 minutes during which Vanessa's mind raced through contingencies and implications. If Zakharov's people had targeted Frank, it meant they had identified him as a threat. And if they had connected Frank to her, the hospital was small, serving the rural community with basic care. They found Colonel Hargrove in the ICU unconscious and intubated. The doctor's prognosis was guarded. Smoke inhalation, second-degree burns, and a possible concussion from what appeared to be a blow to the head before the fire started. "This wasn't random," Mike said quietly as they stood at the colonel's bedside. "They wanted information." Vanessa nodded her face, a mask of controlled fury. "And now they have it." She turned to Frank. "We need to move up our timeline. They'll be coming for me next." As they prepared to leave, a nurse entered with a sealed envelope. "This was left for Ms. Mitchell at the front desk. A foreign gentleman dropped it off just a few minutes ago." Vanessa waited until they were alone in the hospital parking lot before opening the envelope. Inside was a single photograph, a team picture of her SEAL unit in Syria taken days before the ambush. Across the image, written in red ink, was a simple message: "The ghost cannot hide forever." "They know," Mike said unnecessarily. Vanessa stared at the photo memories of each face, each lost brother in arms, flooding back. When she looked up, her eyes had changed. The shopkeeper was gone entirely, now replaced by something colder and more dangerous. "Take Frank to my cabin," she instructed Mike. "Use the back roads, watch for tails. There's a medical kit in the bathroom cabinet, military grade. Do what you can for him there." "Where are you going?" Frank asked, concern evident in his voice. "To get answers," Vanessa replied, her tone leaving no room for argument. "And to make sure they understand what they've started." As Mike and Frank departed in one vehicle, Vanessa took her truck in the opposite direction. The black SUV that had been watching her shop was now parked outside a motel on the outskirts of town. Two men sat inside watching the entrance to room 114. Vanessa parked at a distance and observed for 30 minutes, confirming their patterns and checking for additional security. When satisfied, she circled behind the motel, approaching room 114 from the rear. The lock was standard, defeated in seconds with the tools she carried. Inside, a third man sat at a laptop, communicating via an encrypted channel. He never had the chance to react, as Vanessa pressed her silenced pistol to the base of his skull. "One sound, and you die," she whispered. "Nod if you understand." The man nodded slowly, his body tense but controlled, the reaction of a trained operative. "You hurt an old man today," Vanessa continued, her voice deadly calm. "That was a mistake." "We follow orders," the man replied in accented English. "Just as you once did, Ghost." Vanessa pressed the gun harder against his skull. "What does Zakharov want with the swamp? You know already, or you wouldn't ask." The man's composure was remarkable given his situation. Project Chimera. The question you should ask is why here? Why now? I'm asking you. The man chuckled softly. Because America's enemies pay well for the means to bring it to its knees, and because Zakharov has unfinished business with you. Syria, Vanessa stated. Syria was just business. This is personal. The man tensed slightly, and Vanessa sensed he was preparing to move. Your team interfered with an operation 5 years ago in Turkey. You killed Zakharov's son. The revelation struck Vanessa like a physical blow. The operation in Turkey had been a counter-terrorism mission targeting an arms dealer supplying ISIS. They had never identified the dealer by name, only by his code designation. Her momentary shock was all the opening the operative needed. He lunged sideways, attempting to disarm her. Vanessa reacted with the speed and precision that had made her legendary, sidestepping his movement and delivering a decisive strike to his temple with the butt of her pistol. As he crumpled to the floor unconscious, Vanessa quickly secured him with zip ties and searched the room. The laptop provided the confirmation she needed. Detailed plans for the exchange happening tomorrow night, including the exact coordinates and timing. More disturbing was a file labeled Ghost, containing comprehensive intelligence on her military career, her current identity, and surveillance photos of her shop and home. They had been watching her for months, biding their time. After downloading the data onto a secure drive, Vanessa left, as silently as she had entered, leaving the operative bound and gagged. The two men in the SUV never noticed her departure. By the time they discovered their colleague Vanessa was already miles away, her mind processing the implications of what she had learned. Zakharov wasn't just a criminal. He was a father seeking revenge. And now he had brought that vendetta to her doorstep. As she drove back toward her cabin, a cold resolve settled over her. The men who had died in Syria, her brothers, deserved justice. The colonel, fighting for his life in her cabin, deserved protection. And the innocent people who would suffer if Project Chimera reached its intended buyers deserved a defender. For 4 years, Vanessa Mitchell had tried to bury the ghost. Now it was time to embrace her again. The ghost was going hunting. Dawn broke over the Okefenokee as Vanessa finished her preparations. Her cabin had been transformed into an operations center with maps, satellite imagery, and intelligence reports covering every surface. Colonel Hargrove lay in the spare bedroom stable, but still unconscious, with Mike checking on him regularly. The data you recovered confirms everything, Mike said, reviewing the files from the motel laptop. Exchange happens tonight at 2200. A small aircraft will land on the island with the Chimera payload, then depart with payment. Buyers, Vanessa asked, checking the action on her sidearm. Multiple, apparently. Representatives from 3 terrorist organizations will be present. Zakharov is auctioning Chimera to the highest bidder. Vanessa nodded, absorbing this information with the cool detachment of a professional. We have one advantage they don't expect. I know the swamp better than their scouts. There's an approach route they haven't secured. She indicated a narrow channel on the map that wound through particularly treacherous terrain, a route that appeared impassable to anyone without intimate knowledge of the swamp's secrets. I can get within 600 yards of their position using this approach. From there, I'll have clear shots at the landing zone and command tent. Mike studied the route, his expression dubious. That's through Class A bog. One wrong step and you're gone. Which is precisely why they haven't secured it, Vanessa replied. I've used it before. I know where the solid ground is. The discussion was interrupted by a groan from the spare bedroom. They rushed in to find Colonel Hargrove attempting to sit up, his eyes unfocused but alert. Easy, Colonel, Mike said, gently restraining him. You've been through hell. Zakharov. The colonel managed his voice raspy from smoke inhalation. He was there, at the house. Vanessa and Mike exchanged alarmed glances. He questioned me, Hargrove continued with effort. Wanted to know about you, Vanessa. About Syria. Save your strength, Vanessa urged, but the colonel gripped her wrist with surprising force. Listen to me, he insisted. I've seen him before. Berlin, 88. He was KGB, then running a network of assassins targeting Western intelligence assets. We called him the surgeon because of how precisely he removed problems. The colonel's grip tightened. He recognized me, Vanessa. He remembered Berlin, said it was poetic that we should meet again at the end of our careers. Did you tell him anything? Mike asked. Colonel Hargrove's expression hardened despite his weakened state. I spent 2 years in a North Vietnamese prison camp, son. Zakharov got nothing from me. Vanessa nodded, respecting the old warrior's resilience. Rest now, Colonel. We'll handle it from here. As they returned to the main room, Vanessa's expression was grim. If Zakharov came personally to interrogate Frank, this is more than just business. He's making it personal. Which means he might be more vulnerable to making mistakes, Mike observed. Or more dangerous because he's emotionally invested, Vanessa countered. She checked her watch. We have 10 hours until the exchange. I need to move into position early before dusk. Mike began checking his own weapons, a modified M4 carbine and a Glock 19. What's my role? You stay here with the colonel, Vanessa said firmly. If I don't come back, get him to safety and make sure that intel reaches someone who can act on it. Mike frowned. That's not a two-person job. You need backup in the field. What I need is to know the colonel is protected, Vanessa replied, her tone leaving no room for debate. Zakharov already tried to kill him once. He'll try again. Reluctantly, Mike nodded his agreement. At least take a radio. If things go sideways, I can create a diversion. Vanessa considered this, then agreed. Encrypted Channel 3. Check in every hour after I reach the hide position. If I miss 2 consecutive check-ins, assume I'm compromised. As the day progressed, Vanessa methodically prepared her equipment. Each item was selected with purpose. The Mk-13 rifle with suppressor, a Sig Sauer sidearm, specialized ammunition for different scenarios, communications gear, and survival essentials. Her ghillie suit had been modified for the specific conditions of Okefenokee, incorporating local vegetation and designed to mask her heat signature from thermal imaging equipment. She applied face paint in the mottled pattern that would break up her facial features in the swamp environment. Before departing, she stood at Colonel Hargrove's bedside one last time. The old warrior was sleeping now, his breathing steady but labored. I owe you everything, Frank, she said quietly. Every skill that keeps me alive, every principle worth fighting for. You taught me those. She placed a hand gently on his shoulder. I won't let you down. In the main room, Mike waited with final supplies. Weather report says fog rolling in after sunset. Could work in your favor. Vanessa nodded, securing the last of her gear. Or theirs. Depends on who knows how to use it. As she prepared to leave, Mike handed her a small metal object. A challenge coin from SEAL Team 6. For luck, he said simply. Vanessa accepted it with a nod of understanding. Among special operators, such coins carried significant meaning. Brotherhood, shared sacrifice, commitment to mission. If I'm not back by dawn, she instructed, take the colonel to the safe house we discussed. The thumb drive with the intelligence is in the hollowed-out book on the shelf. The Art of War. Make sure it reaches Captain Reynolds at Naval Special Warfare Command. You'll be back, Mike said with conviction. Vanessa allowed herself a small smile, the first in days. One way or another. As she slipped out the door and into the gathering dusk, Vanessa felt a familiar calm settling over her. The anxiety, the doubt the person she had tried to become, all of it fell away with each step toward the swamp. In its place rose the focused clarity that had made her legendary among operators. The ghost was fully awakened now, moving with deadly purpose into the environment where she reigned supreme. Zakharov had brought war to her doorstep, believing he was the hunter. By dawn, he would know his mistake. Twilight descended over the Okefenokee swamp, transforming the landscape into a primordial realm of shadow and mist. Vanessa moved through the gathering darkness with silent precision, her body low to the ground, each step carefully placed to avoid disturbance. The weight of the Mk-13 rifle across her back was familiar comforting, even as she navigated the treacherous terrain that would have claimed less experienced travelers. The path she followed existed only in her mind, a mental map formed through years of exploration. Where others saw impassable bog, she recognized the subtle signs of solid ground beneath the surface, certain plant groupings, the way light reflected off the water, the presence of specific wildlife. This knowledge had once been a hobby, a way to escape the memories of war. Now it was the edge that might keep her alive. 3 miles into the swamp, Vanessa paused at the edge of a particularly dangerous stretch of bog. To the untrained eye, it appeared no different from the surrounding terrain, a seemingly solid expanse of vegetation floating on dark water. But she knew better. This was what locals called a floating prairie, a mat of vegetation with no solid ground beneath, just 20 feet of water and mud that could swallow a person without a trace. She extracted a narrow probe from her gear and tested carefully, finding the hidden path of submerged cypress knees that would support her weight. Like stepping stones invisible to the eye, they formed a tenuous route across the deadly bog. With methodical patience, she crossed each step, a calculated risk. As darkness claimed the swamp completely, Vanessa activated her night vision equipment, a military-grade monocular that left one eye adapted to natural darkness. The world transformed into shades of green, revealing details invisible to the naked eye. Still, she relied more on her other senses, the subtle changes in air temperature that indicated open water ahead, the different textures of sound as they bounced off various surfaces, the faint scents that distinguished different sections of the swamp. 4 hours into her journey, she approached the final stretch, a narrow channel through dense cypress that would bring her within 600 yards of Zakharov's island base. Here she moved with even greater caution, aware that she was entering territory they might patrol. The channel itself was barely wide enough for a small boat, its entrance obscured by hanging moss and low branches, nature's perfect concealment. She eased into the water, her modified ghillie suit now serving as effective camouflage in the aquatic environment. Moving with glacial slowness to avoid creating ripples, she advanced through the channel, paralleling a route that Zakharov's men would consider too dangerous to patrol effectively. When she finally reached her chosen hide position, a raised hummock with good drainage and clear sightlines to the target area, she allowed herself a moment of grim satisfaction. No ordinary operator could have reached this spot undetected. The ghost had arrived at her hunting ground. Vanessa established her position with the meticulous attention to detail that defined elite snipers. She constructed a natural blind integrating her ghillie suit with surrounding vegetation while creating a stable firing platform. Every movement was deliberate, every adjustment precise. When complete, she was virtually invisible, another feature of the swamp indistinguishable from her environment. Through her scope, she had a clear view of Zakharov's island base. Activity had increased since her last observation. New security measures were being implemented, additional motion sensors placed patrol routes, adjusted weapons checked and rechecked. They were preparing for the exchange. Vanessa activated her secure radio, keeping the volume just audible enough for her enhanced senses. "Overwatch in position," she whispered. "Target area in sight. Increased security preparations underway." Mike's voice came back equally subdued. "Roger that. Weather report shows fog developing in 3 hours. How's visibility?" "Adequate. I have clear sight lines to the landing zone and command tent. 21 tangos visible. Zakharov is on-site northeast quadrant. Colonel stable. No activity near your position. Negative. They're focused inward, preparing for arrival, not expecting visitors. Next check-in 1 hour. Maintain radio discipline." "Roger that. Ghost out." Vanessa settled into the stillness that was a sniper's greatest skill. Her breathing slowed, her muscles relaxed. While maintaining position, her mind entered a state of heightened awareness, combined with perfect patience. Time ceased to have conventional meaning, minutes and hours measured only by subtle changes in the environment around her. Through her scope, she methodically documented the base's layout, mentally marking primary targets, identifying the command structure through observed behavior patterns. Zakharov himself remained largely in the command tent, emerging occasionally to supervise preparations personally. During one such emergence, Vanessa had him centered in her crosshairs, an easy shot at 580 yards for someone of her skill. Her finger hovered near the trigger, the temptation powerful. One squeeze would end the threat, avenge her team, protect countless lives. But the mission parameters were clear in her mind. Eliminating Zakharov would alert his organization. The Chimera weapon would simply be rerouted, the exchange delayed, but not prevented. They needed to intercept the weapon itself and identify the buyers. Reluctantly, she eased her finger away from the trigger. Patience had always been her strength. Tonight would be no different. As predicted, fog began rolling across the swamp 3 hours into her vigil, transforming the landscape into a ghostly realm of diffused light and obscured boundaries. Through her thermal scope, however, the base remained visible, heat signatures moving about in patterns that revealed their tactical formations. It was during her third scheduled radio check that the first complication arose. "Overwatch be advised," Mike's voice came through with controlled urgency. Colonel regained consciousness. He remembers more from his conversation with Zakharov. "The exchange has been moved up. Repeat timeline accelerated." Vanessa felt a spike of adrenaline, but kept her voice steady. "New TOT, 3:30 hours, less than 1 hour from now. Reason for change." "Unknown. Colonel believes Zakharov suspects potential interference." Vanessa processed this information rapidly. "Acknowledged. Maintaining position." "Be careful, Ghost. Colonel says Zakharov mentioned having specialized equipment for dealing with threats." "Understood. Next check-in after the exchange. Ghost out." As if confirming, the updated intelligence activity on the island suddenly intensified. Floodlights were positioned around the landing zone, and security teams deployed to predetermined positions. Through her scope, Vanessa observed Zakharov himself, inspecting the preparations, his silver hair distinctive even in the gathering fog. Then she saw a team of operatives unloading equipment from a reinforced case. Her blood chilled as she recognized the distinctive profile of a FLIR thermal imaging system being mounted on a tripod. Next came a device she recognized from her SEAL training, a long-range acoustic detection system capable of identifying the source of sounds at extreme distances. They were deploying counter-sniper equipment. Vanessa remained perfectly still, calculating her options. The thermal imaging would detect her heat signature if it swept in her direction. The acoustic system would pick up any radio transmission. Her carefully chosen position suddenly felt exposed. With methodical calm, she reached into her pack and removed a specialized thermal blanket developed for Special Operations Forces, and carefully adjusted it over her position. It wouldn't completely mask her heat signature, but it would reduce it enough to potentially register as wildlife rather than human. She then switched her radio to passive mode, able to receive but not transmit. Mike would know what it meant when she missed the next scheduled check-in. They had protocols for this contingency. Through her scope, she watched as a small aircraft appeared in the distance, its navigation lights barely visible through the fog. As it approached, she could make out its profile, a modified Cessna Caravan, commonly used for covert operations due to its reliable performance and ability to land on unprepared surfaces. The aircraft circled once, then began its approach to the makeshift landing zone. Zakharov's men positioned themselves strategically, weapons ready, but not raised professional discipline, evident in their posture and positioning. As the Cessna touched down, Vanessa adjusted her scope's magnification, focusing on the aircraft's door. 3 figures emerged, 1 pilot, who remained with the aircraft, and 2 men in nondescript business attire carrying aluminum briefcases. They were met by Zakharov himself and 4 of his security detail. The exchange would happen in the open within her field of view, a perfect opportunity to gather intelligence on all parties involved. Vanessa activated the small digital camera attached to her scope, recording the proceedings. The buyers' faces would be valuable intelligence, potentially identifying which terror organization was attempting to acquire Chimera. Through her scope, she watched as one of the briefcases was opened, revealing what appeared to be specialized storage containers, likely for the biological agent. The second briefcase, opened by one of the buyers, contained what she assumed was payment, though from her angle she couldn't confirm if it was cash, gold, or other valuables. Then everything changed. One of Zakharov's security team approached him urgently, speaking into his ear. Zakharov's posture stiffened immediately. He barked orders, and suddenly the entire security force was on high alert, weapons raised. Through her scope, Vanessa saw Zakharov pointing toward the swamp, not in her direction, but toward the main approach channels. Something had been detected. Another party was approaching. Her first thought was that Mike had attempted some kind of diversion, but that made no tactical sense given their planning. This was an unknown factor, a third player entering the scenario. Within moments, the sound of gunfire erupted from the far side of the island. Through her thermal scope, Vanessa could make out muzzle flashes and the heat signatures of multiple figures engaged in a firefight. The buyers were being hustled back toward the aircraft by Zakharov's men, the briefcases still in their possession. This unexpected development created both opportunity and danger. The chaos might provide cover for her to act, but also meant unpredictable movements and stray rounds. Years of combat experience had taught her that unplanned firefights were where most casualties occurred. Making a split-second decision, Vanessa adjusted her aim toward the aircraft. If the buyers escaped with Chimera, the mission would fail regardless of what happened to Zakharov. The pilot had already started the engines, preparing for emergency departure. She centered her crosshairs on the aircraft's right engine, exhaled slowly, and squeezed the trigger. The suppressed Mk-13 made a muted coughing sound, the recoil controlled and familiar. Through her scope, she saw the engine housing shatter as her round found its target with pinpoint accuracy. The aircraft's engine sputtered and died, black smoke pouring from the damaged housing. Emergency evacuation was no longer an option. Her intervention, however, had consequences. Even with a suppressor, the distinctive crack of a high-powered rifle round traveling supersonic was identifiable to trained operators. And Zakharov employed only the best. Vanessa immediately shifted position, rolling 3 meters to her right, as her training dictated. Seconds later, a barrage of automatic fire shredded the vegetation where she had just been. They had triangulated her position with impressive speed. The element of surprise was lost. The mission parameters had changed. Now it was about survival and adaptation. Vanessa abandoned her hide position as multiple teams converged on her location. The fog provided concealment, but also disorientation, a double-edged sword that could work for or against her. She moved laterally along the hummock, staying low, using the natural contours for cover. Gunfire continued on the far side of the island, suggesting that whoever had attacked was still engaged with a portion of Zakharov's force. Through breaks in the fog, she could see that the buyers had been escorted to a defensive position, the briefcases still in their possession. Zakharov himself was directing the defense, issuing orders with the confidence of a seasoned commander. Vanessa needed to identify the new players before determining her next move. Adjusting her position to gain a better vantage point of the ongoing firefight, she raised her scope and scanned the unknown attackers. What she saw changed everything. The attackers wore tactical gear with a distinctive pattern. She recognized immediately the same equipment used by CIA Special Activities Division. This wasn't a random attack or competing buyer. This was an official American operation. As if confirming her assessment, her radio crackled to life, broadcasting on an emergency frequency used by U.S. Special Operations Forces. All U.S. personnel in vicinity of Okefenokee Grid, coordinates 106-247. This is Rattlesnake Actual. We are conducting authorized operation against hostile force. Identify yourself if friendly. Authentication code Sierra Echo Alpha Lima. Vanessa hesitated. The authentication code was current, something only legitimate U.S. forces would know. But revealing her position now could compromise both her and the ongoing operation. Before she could decide, the decision was made for her. A team of Zakharov's men had flanked her position, emerging from the fog less than 50 meters away. They moved with the disciplined precision of former Special Forces operators, utilizing proper small-unit tactics. Vanessa shifted smoothly into combat mode. The Mk-13 was too unwieldy for close quarters. She transitioned to her Sig Sauer P-226, acquiring her first target as she moved to better cover. 3 controlled pairs in rapid succession: center, mass headshot. 3 operators down before they could effectively respond. The 4th managed to fire a burst that kicked up mud inches from her position before her round found his throat. But the damage was done. The gunfire had revealed her position to others. She could hear movement converging from multiple directions. Staying in place meant certain death. Vanessa retreated toward the water, using the cypress trees for cover. As she moved, she activated a series of small diversionary devices she had placed during her approach, modified flashbangs that would create confusion without revealing their source as standard military equipment. The first detonated behind her, drawing fire from Zakharov's men. The second and third followed in quick succession, creating the impression of multiple attackers. It was an old SEAL tactic: make the enemy divide their attention and resources. Reaching the water's edge, Vanessa submerged herself completely, using a hollow reed as a breathing tube, another technique from her special operations training. The thermal blanket, now wrapped around her equipment, would mask her heat signature from above. For 3 long minutes, she remained underwater, controlling her breathing through the reed, while Zakharov's men searched the area. She could hear their movements through the water, muffled voices, footsteps on the spongy ground, occasional bursts of gunfire as they engaged suspected targets. When she finally emerged, it was behind a large cypress trunk, water streaming from her ghillie suit. The firefight on the island had intensified, drawing most of Zakharov's forces back to defend the primary objective. This gave her an opportunity to reposition and reassess. Moving with renewed purpose, Vanessa circled to approach the island from a different angle. The CIA operation, unexpected but potentially useful, had created a diversion she could exploit. Her primary objective remained the same: secure Chimera and prevent its transfer to terrorists. As she neared the island again, she observed that the CIA team was pinned down at the southern approach, engaged in a fierce firefight with Zakharov's better-positioned forces. The buyers remained in a hardened position on the northern end, guarded by 4 operators, with the briefcases still in their possession. Zakharov himself had taken cover in the command tent, coordinating the defense through radio communications. From her new position, Vanessa had a clear line of sight to this tent, a high-value target now within range. She unfolded the bipod of her Mk-13 and settled into position, controlling her breathing as she had thousands of times before. The distance was approximately 400 yards, an easy shot under normal conditions, but complicated by poor visibility and the possibility of the tent being reinforced. As she prepared to take the shot, her radio crackled again. "Ghost, this is Rattlesnake Actual. We know you're out there. Authentication code confirmed through command channels. We need coordination, not competition. Respond." The voice was familiar, too familiar. Vanessa felt a chill that had nothing to do with her wet clothes. "Thomas Carter," she whispered to herself, recognizing the CIA agent's voice, the same Thomas Carter who had been present in Syria during her final mission. The mission that had gone catastrophically wrong. This was no coincidence. The CIA hadn't stumbled onto this operation, they'd known about it all along. Which raised the question, how much had they known about Syria as well? Vanessa keyed her radio, keeping her voice low. "Rattlesnake, this is Ghost. Authentication confirmed. Be advised I have eyes on primary target and package. South approach is heavily defended. Recommend flanking east through Sector 4. There was a brief pause before Carter responded. "Copy that, Ghost. Hold position. We're adjusting fire plan. Do not repeat. Do not engage primary target." "Negative, Rattlesnake. Package is priority. Primary target is preparing to relocate." "Ghost, stand down. That's an order from Langley." Vanessa's instincts flared. Something wasn't right. The CIA wanted Zakharov alive. But why the mission should be about securing Chimera, not capturing Zakharov? Before she could respond, movement at the command tent caught her attention. Zakharov was indeed preparing to move, gathering documents, while 2 of his men provided cover. More concerning, one of the buyers was now with him carrying one of the aluminum briefcases. They were splitting the package, a classic tactic, to ensure at least part of the shipment reached its destination if things went wrong. Vanessa made her decision. Official orders or not, she couldn't allow Chimera to leave the island. She centered her crosshairs on the buyer with the briefcase and squeezed the trigger. The round found its mark with devastating precision. The buyer collapsed, the briefcase falling from his lifeless hands. Zakharov and his men immediately dove for cover, returning fire toward her general direction. Her radio exploded with activity. "Ghost, what the hell are you doing? Stand down immediately." Vanessa ignored Carter's commands, shifting her position rapidly to avoid the incoming fire. Her next priority was the second briefcase, still with the other buyer at the northern position. As she moved, a new transmission came through on a different frequency, the emergency channel that only Mike had access to. "Ghost, this is Watchman. Be advised, CIA directive intercepts indicate Carter is compromised. Repeat, Carter is not friendly. Colonel confirmed he was mentioned by Zakharov during interrogation." The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Carter wasn't here to secure Chimera. He was here to ensure its delivery while eliminating witnesses. The Syria ambush, the intelligence leaks, the convenient timing of the CIA arrival, It all connected. "Copy, Watchman," she responded tersely. "Moving to secure second package." The situation had devolved into chaos. CIA forces engaged with Zakharov's men, unaware their own commander was compromised. Zakharov attempting to salvage the operation while under fire from multiple directions. And somewhere in the confusion, a deadly biological weapon that could kill thousands. Vanessa moved through the swamp with renewed urgency, circling to approach the northern position where the second buyer was holed up. The fog provided cover, but also made navigation treacherous. Twice she nearly stumbled into Zakharov's men, avoiding detection only through years of training and instinct. When she finally gained sight of the northern position, what she saw confirmed her worst fears. The second buyer was no longer with his guards. Somehow, in the confusion, he had slipped away, likely with Carter's assistance. She needed to find him before he could escape with Chimera. The island had limited exit points, and with the aircraft disabled, they would need a boat. That meant the eastern dock, where Zakharov kept several small watercraft. Vanessa changed course, moving parallel to the shoreline toward the dock. As she approached, she heard voices hushed but urgent. Through the fog, she could make out two figures boarding a shallow draft boat. One was the second buyer. The other, to her disgust but not surprise, was Thomas Carter. "Hurry," Carter was saying. "Once Zakharov realizes we've double-crossed him, he'll divert everyone to find us." "The money?" the buyer asked in accented English. "Already transferred to the offshore account as agreed. Just get that case to the extraction point, and everyone gets paid." Vanessa had heard enough. She raised her Sig Sauer and stepped from the fog. "CIA working with terrorists now, Carter. That's a new low, even for Langley." Both men froze, Carter's hand moving instinctively toward his weapon. "Don't," Vanessa warned, her aim unwavering. "You're good, but not that good." Carter's expression shifted from shock to calculated calm. "Ghost. Should have known you'd complicate things. Always the perfect soldier, aren't you? Following orders, never questioning the bigger picture. The bigger picture being what's selling biological weapons to terrorists." Carter smiled thinly. "Controlled distribution to selected parties. Parties that serve American interests in regions where we need deniable influence. It's called geopolitics, Mitchell. Something above your pay grade." "It's called treason," Vanessa countered. "And it ends here." "Does it?" Carter's smile widened. "You think this is a rogue operation? Why do you think Langley never investigated the Syria ambush? Why do you think your team was considered acceptable losses? The system you served so faithfully designated you as expendable ghost." The buyer, sensing an opportunity while Vanessa's attention was divided, made a sudden move toward her. Without shifting her gaze from Carter, Vanessa fired a single round that caught the buyer in the shoulder, spinning him to the ground. "Next one's center mass," she said evenly. "The briefcase. Kick it toward me." Carter's expression hardened. "You're making a mistake, Mitchell. There are things happening beyond your comprehension. Players you can't even imagine." "Save the spy novel dialogue, Carter. I've heard it before from better men than you." The standoff was interrupted by a burst of gunfire from the direction of the island's interior. Zakharov's men had begun to sweep the perimeter, searching for the missing buyer and briefcase. Carter seized the momentary distraction to draw his weapon, a compact Glock 26. Vanessa fired first, her round catching him in the upper chest. Carter staggered, but remained standing, returning fire as he dove for cover behind the dock's mooring posts. The wounded buyer attempted to crawl toward the boat, still fixated on completing his mission despite his injury. Vanessa put a round through his leg, immobilizing him. "Stay down if you want to live," she ordered, turning her attention back to Carter. The CIA agent was a professional, wounded but dangerous. He laid down, suppressing fire, forcing Vanessa to take cover behind a cypress knee. "You can't win this, Mitchell," Carter called out. "Even if you kill me, even if you secure Chimera, they'll send others. The operation is too important to fail." "Important to who?" Vanessa demanded. "Not to the American people who'll die when these weapons inevitably used against us. Collateral damage, acceptable losses for strategic advantage." The casual dismissal of human life ignited a cold fury in Vanessa. This was why she had joined the SEALs, to protect innocent lives from men like Carter, who saw people as pawns on a geopolitical chessboard. Their exchange was cut short by the arrival of Zakharov's men, alerted by the gunfire. 3 operators emerged from the fog, weapons raised. In the ensuing 3-way firefight, Vanessa used her superior position and training to eliminate 2 of Zakharov's men, while Carter killed the 3rd. The CIA agent used the opportunity to make a break for the boat, firing blindly in Vanessa's direction to cover his movement. She returned fire, catching him in the leg as he reached the vessel. Carter fell, clutching his wounded limb, but managed to drag himself into the boat. Before he could start the engine, Vanessa emerged from cover, her weapon trained on his head. "It's over, Carter. Step away from the controls." Blood soaked Carter's pant leg, but his eyes remained defiant. "You know what Chimera can do, Ghost. You know its potential. Are you really willing to let that power slip through America's fingers? Let our enemies develop it instead." "America doesn't use biological weapons against civilians," Vanessa replied firmly. "That's what separates us from the people we fight." Carter laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Such naivety from someone who's seen the world's darkest corners. Do you really still believe in American exceptionalism after everything you've witnessed?" "I believe in the oath I took," Vanessa said, "to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Right now, you're looking like the latter." Carter's hand inched toward a concealed pocket. "Last chance, Mitchell. Walk away. Pretend you never saw me. I can make the Syria file disappear, give you back your life. My team's already dead because of you. There's no life to give back." Carter's movement was lightning fast, drawing a backup weapon from his ankle holster. But Vanessa was faster. Her round caught him between the eyes, ending the threat permanently. In the sudden silence that followed, Vanessa approached the motionless body of the buyer, confirming he was still alive, though seriously wounded. The aluminum briefcase lay nearby, its contents intact. Chimera was secure. Her radio crackled with Mike's voice, urgent and concerned. "Ghost report status. Multiple explosions observed on the island. CIA forces appear to be withdrawing." "Package secured," Vanessa replied. "Carter is down. Confirmed hostile. Buyer in custody, wounded but stable. Zakharov. Still on the island, status unknown. CIA forces engaged but pulling back. Colonel says if Zakharov escapes, this isn't over. He'll regroup and try again." Vanessa glanced toward the island, where gunfire had begun to diminish, a sign that one side was either victorious or retreating. "Understood. Moving to secondary objective." Had she secured the Chimera briefcase and zip-tied the wounded buyer to a nearby tree, he wasn't going anywhere with a shattered shoulder and leg. Then, checking her ammunition and readying her Mk-13 rifle once more, she turned back toward the island. Zakharov was still there, the man responsible for the deaths of her teammates in Syria, the man who had tortured Colonel Hargrove, the man who would continue threatening innocent lives as long as he remained free. The ghost had unfinished business. The fog had begun to thin as Vanessa approached the island once more. revealing the aftermath of the three-way conflict. Bodies lay scattered across the clearing, Zakharov's men, CIA operatives, and one of the buyers. The command tent was partially collapsed equipment, destroyed documents scattered by the wind. Through her scope, Vanessa counted 5 of Zakharov's men still alive, establishing a defensive perimeter around what appeared to be a secondary command post, a reinforced shed near the eastern side of the island. The CIA forces had indeed withdrawn, likely on orders from handlers who had lost contact with Carter and assumed the operation compromised. Zakharov himself was visible inside the shed, visible through an open door as he communicated via satellite phone. Even from a distance, his expression conveyed controlled fury, a man whose carefully orchestrated operation had collapsed, but who was already planning his next move. Vanessa assessed the situation with cold precision. 5 trained operators, plus Zakharov. Limited cover between her position and the shed. Approximately 350 yards to target. Favorable wind conditions. The odds weren't ideal, but she had faced worse. As she prepared to engage, her radio activated again, this time on the emergency channel. "Ghost? This is Watchman. Satellite imagery shows additional forces approaching from the south. Estimated 8 to 10 personnel, heavily armed. ETA 5 minutes. Likely Zakharov's backup team." Vanessa acknowledged the information with a grim sense of urgency. The window for action was closing rapidly. Once reinforcements arrived, extracting with Chimera would become exponentially more difficult. She made her decision. Speed and shock effect would be her advantages. The remaining operators were tired, rattled by the CIA attack, and not expecting a single assailant to launch a frontal assault. Vanessa loaded a single M84 stun grenade, her last, and calculated the throw distance to land it precisely between the defensive positions, then adjusting her Mk-13 for rapid target acquisition rather than maximum accuracy. She prepared for the assault. The stun grenade arced through the air, landing exactly where intended. The flashbang effect was immediate, disorienting the perimeter guards and creating momentary chaos. In that critical window, Vanessa moved forward, rifle at the ready. Her first shot took down the nearest guard before he could recover. Her second found another as he raised his weapon in her general direction. The third guard managed to fire a burst that went wide before her round silenced him permanently. The remaining 2 operators recovered more quickly, taking cover and returning fire with disciplined bursts. Vanessa rolled behind a fallen tree, bullets splintering the wood inches from her position. This was no longer a sniper engagement, it had devolved into a close-quarters firefight. She transitioned smoothly to her sidearm, knowing that maneuverability would be key. The 4th guard attempted to flank her position, moving through the underbrush with practiced stealth. But Vanessa had anticipated the tactic, positioning herself to cover the most likely approach route. When he emerged, her double tap caught him in the chest and neck. The final guard was more cautious, laying down suppressing fire while retreating toward the shed, protecting Zakharov at the cost of offensive capability. A professional to the end. Inside the shed, Zakharov had taken cover, visible only in glimpses, as he prepared his own weapon, a customized AK-12 with advanced optics. The Russian was no mere handler. He was a former operator himself, trained in the brutal methods of the KGB's special units. Vanessa needed to end this quickly before reinforcements arrived. Extracting a smoke grenade from her gear, she deployed it to cover her advance, using the concealment to close distance to the shed. The final guard, confused by the smoke, fired blindly into the obscured area. Vanessa had already changed position, circling to approach from the side. Her shots caught him in the lower back, as he turned too late to track her movement. Now only Zakharov remained. The Russian had sealed himself in the shed, transforming the simple structure into a hardened position. Metal plating reinforced the walls, not enough to stop a high-powered rifle round, but sufficient to make pistol fire ineffective. "I know who you are, Ghost," Zakharov called out, his accented voice carrying across the clearing. "The famous sniper of SEAL Team 6. Tell me, do you still dream of your teammates dying in Syria?" Vanessa didn't respond, knowing he was attempting to provoke an emotional reaction that might lead to a tactical error. "They died confused, you know," Zakharov continued, wondering why their intelligence was wrong, why their extraction never came, why their own government abandoned them. Vanessa circled the shed, looking for a vulnerability in its construction. The roof was standard corrugated metal, thinner than the reinforced walls, a potential entry point. "Carter told me all about you," Zakharov taunted. "How you survived when the others died. How you carried the guilt. Did you ever suspect he was the one who betrayed your team to me?" The revelation, while shocking, didn't break Vanessa's concentration. She had already suspected Carter's involvement after their confrontation at the dock. The confirmation merely strengthened her resolve. Using the surrounding trees for cover, she climbed to a position level with the shed's roof. From here she could breach through the weaker ceiling material and engage Zakharov from above, an angle he wouldn't expect. "Your Colonel Hargrove proved more resilient than expected," Zakharov called out, still trying to provoke a response. "Even at his age, he withstood methods that break much younger men. He must have taught you well." Vanessa had reached position directly above the shed. She could hear Zakharov moving below, positioning himself to cover the door, the entry point he assumed she would use. With careful precision, she removed a tactical knife from her gear and began cutting through the corrugated metal, creating an opening just large enough to deploy a flashbang through. "Your reinforcements won't make it in time," she finally responded, her voice carrying clearly to the shed below. "It's just you and me now, Zakharov, like it should have been from the beginning." Her words had the intended effect. Zakharov fired a burst through the roof in the direction of her voice, but Vanessa had already shifted position, anticipating his response. The flashbang dropped through the opening she'd created, detonating with concussive force in the confined space. Without hesitation, Vanessa followed it, dropping through the roof in a controlled entry that her SEAL instructors would have approved. She landed in a combat crouch, weapon raised, scanning for her target through the lingering smoke. Zakharov had been partially protected from the flashbang by a desk he'd overturned, but was still momentarily disoriented. Their eyes met across the small space, Predator, recognizing Predator. Despite the circumstances, a flicker of professional respect passed between them. "Impressive." Zakharov acknowledged, his weapon raised but not firing. "Carter said you were exceptional. I see he wasn't exaggerating for once." "It's over," Vanessa stated flatly. "Your buyers are dead or captured. Chimera is secured. Your CIA contact is eliminated." Zakharov's expression revealed genuine surprise at this last piece of information. "Carter is dead by your hand. Interesting. I didn't think you had it in you to kill a fellow American." "Traitors aren't Americans," Vanessa replied. "They're just traitors." Zakharov nodded slightly, as if appreciating the sentiment. "So what happens now?" "Ghost, you take me into custody. Turn me over to your government, the same government that sanctioned this operation through Carter." "You don't get to negotiate," Vanessa said. "You don't get to talk your way out. Not after Syria. Not after what you did to my team." A thin smile crossed Zakharov's face. "Ah, so this is personal. Vengeance, not duty. That makes you predictable, Ghost. Dangerous for someone in your profession." His hand shifted slightly, revealing a small detonator partially concealed behind his leg. "Dead man's switch," he explained calmly, "connected to enough explosives to turn this island into a crater. You shoot me, my finger releases, and we both join your teammates in whatever afterlife you believe in." Vanessa's aim didn't waver. "You're bluffing." "Am I? You've seen my work, Ghost. You know I leave nothing to chance. Even now my reinforcements approach. This is simply insurance." Through the shed's window, Vanessa could see movement at the island's southern approach, the backup team arriving as predicted. Her window for action was closing rapidly. "You have a choice," Zakharov continued. "Kill me and die here, or lower your weapon, let me walk away and live to fight another day. A tactical retreat is not surrender as your military teaches." For a moment, Vanessa was transported back to Syria, the ambush, the screams of her teammates, the helplessness as she watched them die one by one while she lay wounded, unable to save them. "They deserved better," she said quietly. Zakharov raised an eyebrow. "Your team?" "Perhaps, but they were soldiers. They understood the risks. Not from their own side, not from men like Carter." Zakharov studied her face, seeming to reach a decision. "If it helps you, Ghost, know that your team fought well. They died as warriors, not victims. In my culture, we respect such endings." "Respect." Vanessa's voice hardened. "You don't know the meaning of the word." In that moment, her radio crackled to life. "Ghost! This is Watchman. Be advised, Colonel is mobile and monitoring comms. He says to tell you Berlin has a twin." The cryptic message meant nothing to Vanessa, but Zakharov's reaction was immediate, a flicker of genuine alarm crossing his features before he controlled it. "The old man remembered," he murmured almost to himself. "After all these years." Whatever "Berlin has a twin" meant, it had affected Zakharov's confidence. Vanessa seized the psychological advantage. "Last chance," she said. "Surrender now, or I will kill you where you stand." Zakharov's eyes narrowed, calculating new odds. "You Americans," he said finally, "so confident in your righteousness, so certain of your moral high ground." His finger tensed on the detonator. "Let's test that certainty, shall we?" What happened next occurred in fractions of seconds. Zakharov's finger began to release the detonator as he raised his weapon. Vanessa fired a single round that caught him in the right shoulder, his detonator hand causing him to drop the device. Her second round struck his left knee, collapsing him to the floor. With methodical precision, she kicked away his weapon and secured the detonator, which indeed appeared to be connected to explosive devices placed around the shed. Zakharov lay on the floor, breathing heavily through the pain, but still defiant. "Now what, Ghost? Your vengeance is incomplete. I'm still breathing." Vanessa zip-tied his hands behind his back, tightening the restraints with perhaps more force than necessary. "Vengeance isn't my mission," she said coldly. "Justice is." Outside, the reinforcements had reached the island perimeter. She had minutes at most before they discovered the shed. "Your men will free me," Zakharov said, "and I will find you again." "No," Vanessa replied simply. "You won't." She retrieved a small device from her gear, a military-grade tracking beacon, and secured it to Zakharov's belt. Then, using the sat phone from his equipment, she dialed a number only a handful of people in the world would recognize. "Switchboard, this is Ghost. Authentication code Echo Romeo Alpha Sierra Echo. I have a Priority 1 package for delivery. Transmitting coordinates now." The voice that responded was professionally neutral. "Authentication confirmed. Coordinates received. Package description. Human asset. Former KGB designation surgeon. Connected to Project Chimera and Syria incident. Tracking beacon active." There was a brief pause before the voice returned. Understood. Extraction team dispatched. ETA 30 minutes. Secure package and withdraw. Vanessa ended the call, aware of Zakharov's incredulous expression. Who was that? He demanded. CIA. They're compromised, as you well know. Not CIA, Vanessa replied. Something older. Something deeper. An organization that remembers what honor means. Understanding dawned in Zakharov's eyes. The old cold warriors, he whispered. I thought they had all retired or died. Not all, Vanessa said, thinking of Colonel Hargrove. Some still stand watch. She administered a sedative from her medical kit, enough to keep Zakharov unconscious until the extraction team arrived. As the Russian's eyes grew heavy, he managed one final question. Was it worth it? Ghost. All the death, all the sacrifice for a system that betrays its own. Vanessa considered the question as she prepared to withdraw. The system isn't perfect, she acknowledged, but it's worth fighting for, worth fixing. The alternative is men like you and Carter deciding the fate of millions. As Zakharov lapsed into unconsciousness, Vanessa secured the shed and prepared her exfiltration route. The reinforcements were conducting a systematic sweep of the island, but they hadn't yet discovered their employer's condition. She activated her emergency radio one final time. Watchman package secured for special delivery. Secondary objective complete. Beginning extraction. Mike's voice came back, relief evident. Copy that, Ghost. Colonel says, well done. Return to base. We're moving to fallback position Alpha as discussed. Vanessa took one last look at the unconscious form of Zakharov, the man who had haunted her dreams for 4 years. Justice would be served, though not in the way she had once imagined. The ghost melted back into the swamp, leaving behind the chaos she had created. The night embraced her, concealing her passage as she began the long journey home. Behind her, specialized forces were already inbound veterans of a shadow war that had never truly ended with the fall of the Soviet Union. They would ensure Zakharov faced consequences far beyond what any public court could impose. As for the ghost, her war continued. There would be other threats, other enemies, other innocents to protect. But for now, she had honored her fallen teammates the only way that mattered, by completing the mission they had died for. The swamp welcomed her back into its dark embrace, its secrets joining hers in the gathering night. The swamp had fallen silent, as if holding its breath. Moonlight filtered through gaps in the cypress canopy, casting silver patterns on the dark water, as Vanessa made her way back through the treacherous terrain. Her body moved with mechanical precision, despite the fatigue and minor wounds she had sustained during the confrontation with Zakharov's men. 3 miles from the island, she paused to check her surroundings, the habits of a lifetime impossible to ignore even now. Satisfied she wasn't being followed, she retrieved the satellite phone secured in a waterproof pouch and made contact once more. Watchman Ghost, position check. Mike's voice came back immediately. Ghost. We're at fallback Alpha. Colonel's condition stable but requires medical attention within 12 hours. What's your status? Package secured. Special delivery team confirmed extraction of primary target. Secondary package also secured. The secondary package, the Chimera bioweapon, was secured in a specialized containment unit strapped to her back, retrieved from the wounded buyer, before she'd left him for the extraction team to collect. Estimated arrival, Mike asked. Vanessa calculated the remaining distance against her current pace. 2 hours, assuming no complications. Be advised we're tracking movement along southern approach channels, multiple craft running dark. Possible hostiles searching for their boss. Understood. We'll adjust route accordingly. She altered her course, taking a more circuitous path, that would avoid the main waterways where Zakharov's reinforcements would likely be searching. It would add an hour to her journey, but significantly reduce the risk of detection. As she moved deeper into the swamp, Vanessa allowed herself to process what had transpired. Carter's betrayal, while shocking, fit a pattern she had suspected since Syria. The CIA officer had always been conveniently absent during critical moments of that final mission, present for the planning but mysteriously called away just before the ambush. More troubling was his revelation about higher authorization. If Carter had been acting with sanction from elements within the intelligence community, the implications were far-reaching. Who could she trust to handle Chimera safely? Who would ensure Zakharov faced justice rather than being quietly eliminated, or worse, recruited? The colonel would know. Frank Hargrove had navigated these murky waters for decades during the Cold War. His connections to the old guard, the patriots who placed country above politics, would be essential in the coming days. Her thoughts were interrupted by the distant sound of airboat engines, the distinctive roar echoing across the water. Zakharov's men had expanded their search pattern, moving faster than she had anticipated. They were still distant, but the sound carried far in the night air. Vanessa adjusted her route again, moving toward an area of the swamp locals called the maze, a dense network of floating vegetation and underwater obstacles that would be impassable to the airboats. Few people knew how to navigate it safely, but she had spent years mapping its secrets. As she entered the maze, the sounds of pursuit faded behind her. Here in this primordial labyrinth, she was the apex predator. The ghost moved like a shadow through channels too narrow for conventional craft, over patches of seemingly solid ground that would swallow the unwary whole. An hour into the maze, she paused at a small hummock, one of the few truly solid patches of ground in this section of swamp. The night had grown colder, and she needed to check the Chimera container's integrity. The specialized case appeared undamaged, its seals intact. The thought of what it contained, a weapon capable of killing thousands, reinforced the importance of her mission. She was preparing to continue when her instincts flared. Something had changed in the ambient sounds of the swamp, a subtle shift that most would never notice. Vanessa immediately took cover, her hand uneared moving to her sidearm. The silence stretched for long seconds, broken only by the occasional call of a night bird. Then from the darkness, a voice spoke, calm, measured, and chillingly familiar. "Impressive navigation, Ghost. The boys said no one could move through the maze at night. I knew better. Carter, somehow impossibly alive." Vanessa remained motionless, controlling her breathing as she scanned the darkness. How had he survived? She had put a round through his head at point-blank range. "I'm not actually there, if that's what you're wondering," the voice continued now, recognizable as coming from a small speaker. "Consider this a dead man's message. If you're hearing it, certain parameters have been met, namely, my vitals flatlining, or the tracker I placed on the Chimera case moving through this exact location." A trap, then. Carter had anticipated her actions, prepared contingencies. It was what made him dangerous, the same methodical thinking that had defined her own military career. By now, you've probably figured out that Project Chimera was never just about the bioweapon, Carter's recorded voice explained. It was about identifying and eliminating loose ends from Syria. You, Zakharov. Anyone who knew the truth about Operation Black Star. Black Star, the classified designation of the Syria mission that had claimed her team. A mission that officially had never existed. The weapon is genuine, of course, too valuable to use as mere bait. But its intended destination wasn't some terrorist cell. It was a secure facility where it could be studied, replicated, improved. American hands, not foreign. As Carter's voice continued, Vanessa scanned for the trap that would inevitably accompany this message. The hummock was too convenient, too perfectly positioned as a rest stop in the maze. She should have been more cautious. "Don't bother looking for explosives or remotely triggered weapons," Carter's voice said, as if reading her thoughts. "This isn't that kind of trap. It's much simpler. This message is being broadcast on an open frequency, one monitored by Zakharov's remaining forces. They're triangulating the signal as I speak." Vanessa immediately spotted the small transmitter attached to a cypress knee, disguised as natural growth, but now blinking with a faint red light. The bastard had used her own tactics against her, luring her into a predetermined kill zone. "Consider this my final gift to you, Ghost. A warrior's death. Fighting to the end, as you would want. Better than growing old, forgotten by the country you served so faithfully." The recording ended with a soft click. In the distance, Vanessa could already hear the sound of approaching craft, smaller than airboats, likely the shallow draft canoes that could navigate portions of the maze. She had minutes, perhaps less, to prepare. Staying would mean fighting overwhelming odds in a position Carter had chosen precisely because it favored the attackers. Fleeing would mean dangerous movement through the most treacherous parts of the maze in darkness, pursued by men who now had a fix on her position. The tactical calculation took seconds. Vanessa removed the transmitter and secured it to a small flotation device from her gear. With a gentle push, she sent it drifting down a false channel that led to a particularly deadly section of bog, one that appeared solid but would swallow men and equipment without a trace. Then, readjusting the Chimera container, she slipped back into the water, choosing a route few would dare attempt, a submerged passage beneath a fallen cypress that local legends claimed had claimed a dozen lives over the years. As she moved, she could hear Zakharov's men converging on the hummock, their voices carrying across the water in harsh whispers. They would find the abandoned transmitter soon enough, follow its path, and face the swamp's deadly embrace, a fate she wouldn't wish on anyone but couldn't prevent if she wanted to complete her mission. The underwater passage was as treacherous as she remembered, a claustrophobic channel with barely enough space to navigate while maintaining a thin air pocket for breathing. Twice she nearly lost her way in the absolute darkness, relying solely on tactile memory and the current's subtle pull to guide her. When she finally emerged on the other side, drawing deep breaths into oxygen-starved lungs, the sounds of pursuit had faded entirely. Either Zakharov's men had lost her trail, or they had met the fate the swamp reserved for those who failed to respect its dangers. Vanessa checked her compass and resumed her journey. The fallback position was less than an hour away now, an old hunting cabin owned by Colonel Hargrove under a false identity, positioned on one of the few access roads that reached into this section of the Okefenokee. As she neared the cabin, she adopted full stealth protocols, approaching from downwind, scanning for signs of surveillance or ambush, identifying escape routes before making final approach. The lessons of Syria had been paid for in blood. She would not dishonor her fallen teammates by making the same mistakes. The cabin appeared secure, a single light visible through shuttered windows, the colonel's distinctive jeep parked alongside Mike's nondescript sedan. Still, she observed for 20 minutes before making her presence known, using a specific pattern of taps on the rear door that she and the colonel had established years ago. Mike opened the door, his expression flooding with relief when he saw her. "Thank God," he said simply, ushering her inside. The cabin's interior was Spartan but functional, a main room with basic furnishings, a small kitchen area, and 2 doors leading to what she presumed were bedrooms. Colonel Hargrove was propped up on a medical cot in the main room, an IV drip running into his arm, but his eyes were clear and alert. "The ghost returns," he said, his voice stronger than it had been at her home. "Mission accomplished." Vanessa carefully removed the Chimera container and placed it on the table. "Package secured. Zakharov in custody of your old friends. but we have complications." She briefed them on Carter's survival and subsequent message from the grave, the revelation about Operation Black Star, and the pursuit through the maze. Neither man interrupted as she laid out the facts with military precision. When she finished, the colonel was silent for a long moment, his weathered face grave. "Black Star," he finally said. "I suspected as much, but hoped I was wrong." "You know about it?" Mike asked. "Not the operational details," Hargrove clarified, "but the designation. It was used during the Cold War for highly compartmentalized operations, ones with potential blowback so severe that deniability wasn't just preferred, it was essential." "Carter said Chimera's real destination was American hands," Vanessa said, "a facility where it could be studied and replicated." The colonel nodded grimly. Certain elements within the intelligence community never abandoned bioweapons research despite treaty obligations. They just took it deeper underground using cutouts and false flags to maintain deniability. "And Syria," Vanessa pressed, "my team likely witnessed something they weren't supposed to see," Hargrove theorized. "Perhaps a handoff of earlier research. Carter arranged the ambush to eliminate witnesses using Zakharov as the instrument." The pieces fit, forming a picture darker than even Vanessa had imagined. Not just betrayal by a rogue agent, but a systematic operation sanctioned by elements within her own government. "So what now?" Mike asked, voicing the question in all their minds. "If what you're saying is true, turning Chimera over to official channels could just put it back in the hands of the same people who sanctioned this operation." Colonel Hargrove straightened, wincing slightly at the movement. "Not all channels are compromised. There are still people in position who remember their oath to the Constitution, not to hidden agendas." He gestured toward a secure satellite phone on the table. "I've made contact with an old colleague, Admiral James Forrester, Joint Chiefs. He's one of the good ones. Always has been. He's arranging a secure handoff personnel he personally vouches for." "Can we trust him?" Vanessa asked, not because she doubted the colonel's judgment, but because trust had become a scarce commodity. "With my life," Hargrove replied without hesitation, "with the lives of everyone in this room. James and I served together in operations that will never see the light of day during the darkest days of the Cold War. He's one of the few who never forgot what we were fighting for." Vanessa nodded, accepting his assessment. In her world, such personal vouching carried more weight than any official credentials. "Handoff details," she asked. "Dawn Hawkins Point, Coast Guard cutter, minimal crew, all personally vetted. They'll take Chimera directly to a secure facility under Joint Chiefs control, bypassing the usual channels." Mike checked his watch. "That's less than 5 hours from now. Zakharov's remaining forces are still searching the swamp. Getting to Hawkins Point means traveling by road exposed." "We've faced worse odds," Vanessa said simply. The colonel's eyes met hers, a silent communication passing between them, the understanding that existed between warriors who had seen the same darkness. "One more mission, Ghost," he said quietly. "Then you can rest." Vanessa checked her remaining ammunition, cleaned her sidearm, and prepared for the final phase of an operation that had begun 4 years ago in the dust of Syria. One way or another, it would end today. As the first hints of pre-dawn light began to soften the eastern sky, 3 figures emerged from the cabin: a wounded but determined old soldier, a former SEAL operator in his prime, and a woman whose skills and courage had earned her a place among the elite warriors of her generation. The Ghost was going to finish what others had started. And heaven help anyone who stood in her way. The journey to Hawkins Point should have been straightforward, 40 minutes by road, following the rural highways that skirted the eastern edge of the swamp. But nothing about this mission had been straightforward from the beginning. 10 minutes into the drive with Mike at the wheel of the sedan, Colonel Hargrove monitoring radio frequencies from the passenger seat, and Vanessa in the rear with the Chimera container, they spotted the roadblock. It wasn't official, no police vehicles or uniformed officers. Just two black SUVs positioned across the rural highway and men with military posture holding weapons that civilians shouldn't possess. Zakharov's men, Vanessa observed, her voice calm as she assessed the threat. They've figured out we're moving by road. Mike slowed the vehicle, maintaining enough distance to react. Options. No alternate routes that get us to Hawkins in time, the colonel said, studying a map. Next access road is 8 miles back, adds at least an hour to the journey. Vanessa had already calculated trajectories, angles, and probabilities. We breach it. They're expecting us to turn around, giving their vehicles time to pursue and run us down on an open stretch. We do the opposite. Breach how? Mike asked. We're in a civilian sedan, not an armored vehicle. Speed and surprise, Vanessa replied. They've positioned to block the road, but left a vulnerability, the drainage ditch on the right side. It's shallow enough for the car to use as a bypass if we hit it at the right angle. The colonel nodded his agreement. Classic error. They've set up for intimidation, not an actual hard block. Expecting civilian behavior, not tactical response. Mike tightened his grip on the wheel. So I floor it, aim for the ditch to bypass their vehicles, and hope they don't turn us into Swiss cheese in the process. I'll provide covering fire from the rear window, Vanessa said, already checking her weapon. Focus on driving. Colonel, I need you to secure Chimera and brace for impact. This won't be smooth. Without waiting for further discussion, Mike accelerated rapidly, the sedan's engine protesting as it reached speeds it was never designed to maintain on rural roads. The distance to the roadblock closed with alarming speed. The men at the SUVs reacted predictably, first confusion at the approaching vehicle, then raised weapons as they realized the sedan wasn't stopping. By the time they began firing, Mike had already committed to the maneuver, swerving hard right to hit the drainage ditch at the optimal angle. Vanessa fired through the rear window with controlled precision, targeting the men rather than the vehicles. Her first shots found one of the gunmen's center mass, dropping him instantly. The second took cover behind an SUV, returning fire that shattered the sedan's rear window. The sedan hit the drainage ditch with bone-jarring force, bottoming out, but maintaining momentum. Mike fought the wheel as the vehicle bounced violently, somehow keeping it tracking through the narrow space between the roadblock and the tree line. More gunfire erupted, rounds punching through the sedan's body panels. Vanessa continued returning fire, conservative with ammunition, but devastating in accuracy. A second gunman fell, clutching his shoulder. Then they were past the roadblock, the sedan fishtailing as Mike wrestled it back onto the asphalt. The side mirror showed Zakharov's men scrambling to return to their vehicles, but the surprise of the breach had bought precious seconds. "Anyone hit?" Mike called out, pushing the abused sedan to its limits as they accelerated away. "Negative," Vanessa replied, scanning behind them as the SUVs began to pursue. "But they're mobile. ETA to Hawkins Point. 30 minutes at this speed," the colonel answered, his voice strained but steady. "Chimera container secure." "Those SUVs are faster than this sedan," Mike observed grimly. "They'll catch us before we reach the point." Vanessa had already anticipated this. "We need to split up, create confusion about which vehicle contains Chimera." The colonel immediately grasped her intention. "My Jeep is at Thompson's Creek Bridge 5 minutes ahead. Old arrangement with local fishing guides, they keep spare vehicles at various access points." "Perfect," Vanessa decided. "Mike and I take the Jeep with Chimera. Colonel, you continue in the sedan as a decoy. Lead them away from Hawkins Point." "Too risky for him alone," Mike objected. "I may be old, son, but I'm not dead yet," the colonel replied with grim humor. "I've been evading Soviet pursuit vehicles since before you were born. These amateurs don't stand a chance." The plan was set. As they approached Thompson's Creek Bridge, Mike slowed just enough for Vanessa to transfer the Chimera container and herself to the waiting jeep concealed beneath the bridge's approach. The colonel slid into the driver's seat of the sedan as Mike joined Vanessa. "Good hunting, Ghost," the colonel said a soldier's farewell that acknowledged the dangers ahead. "See you at the rendezvous, old man," Vanessa replied, the familiar banter masking deeper emotions. The vehicles separated the sedan, continuing along the main highway, deliberately visible, while the jeep took a smaller access road that wound through dense forest toward Hawkins Point. In the distance, they could hear the SUVs in pursuit, following the more obvious target. The colonel had bought them time, but the clock was still ticking. Dawn was breaking, painting the eastern sky with shades of orange and gold. The Coast Guard cutter would be approaching Hawkins Point, now maintaining radio silence as instructed. Waiting for the handoff. Mike navigated the jeep with skill, pushing the rugged vehicle along the narrow access road at speeds that sent it bouncing over ruts and sliding around corners. Vanessa maintained vigilance, watching for signs they'd been discovered, or that Zakharov's men had anticipated their maneuver. 20 minutes later, they crested a small rise, and Hawkins Point came into view, a simple dock, extending into a sheltered cove where the swamp met deeper water. Anchored offshore, a Coast Guard cutter waited, its profile unmistakable in the strengthening dawn light. "Looks clear," Mike observed, scanning the area as they approached. Vanessa wasn't convinced. "Too clear. No cover, no concealment, open approach. Perfect place for an ambush." They stopped the jeep at the tree line, maintaining concealment while assessing the situation. The dock appeared deserted, the cutter maintaining position about 100 yards offshore, close enough for a small boat to reach it quickly, far enough to react if trouble developed on shore. "Direct approach is too exposed," Vanessa decided. "We need to verify the cutter is friendly before committing." Mike nodded his agreement. "Signaling protocol." "Admiral Forrester would have established one. We need the colonel." Vanessa reached for the secure satellite phone, then hesitated. "Using this gives away our position if anyone's monitoring frequencies." "Without the protocol, we're stuck here," Mike pointed out. "For all we know, that cutter could be compromised." Vanessa made the call, keeping it brief. "Watchman to Guardian. Status and verification." The colonel's voice came back immediately, sounding winded but composed. "Lost our friends at the Miller Creek turnoff. Admiral's recognition signal is Berlin remembers Moscow. Response is only in winter. Copy that. Proceeding to handoff." The connection terminated. Vanessa surveyed the dock once more. "I'll approach alone with the package. You maintain overwatch from that elevated position." She indicated a small bluff overlooking the dock. "If anything feels wrong, I extract immediately." Mike looked like he wanted to object, but recognized the tactical soundness of her plan. "I've got you covered." With the Chimera container secured to her back, Vanessa moved toward the dock, using available cover sparse as it was, and maintaining awareness of sight lines and potential firing positions. Each step was measured, each pause calculated to observe and assess. The dock creaked beneath her weight as she walked its length, exposed and vulnerable in the strengthening daylight. When she reached the end, she used a small signal mirror to flash a predetermined pattern toward the cutter. Response was immediate. A small, rigid-hull inflatable boat detached from the cutter's side, carrying 2 Coast Guard personnel in standard uniforms. As they approached, Vanessa maintained her position, one hand near her concealed sidearm. The boat came alongside the dock, its motor idling softly. One of the Coast Guardsmen, an officer based on his insignia, looked up at her with professional detachment. "Berlin remembers Moscow," he said clearly. "Only in winter?" Vanessa responded, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly at the correct exchange. The officer nodded. "Admiral Forrester sends his regards to the Colonel. We're authorized to take possession of the package and transport it directly to secure facility Darkwater." Vanessa studied the man carefully, looking for any sign of deception. Finding none, she began to unsling the container from her back. That's when she heard it, the distinctive mechanical whine of a drone approaching rapidly from the direction of the forest. Before she could react, gunfire erupted from multiple positions around the dock's approach. Vanessa dove for cover behind the dock's only substantial structure, a small equipment shed, as bullets splintered the wooden planking around her. The Coast Guard boat reversed abruptly, its occupants drawing weapons as they assessed the attack. Through her earpiece, Mike's voice came urgently. "Multiple hostiles, at least 8, emerging from concealed positions in the tree line. Professional deployment. Military precision." This wasn't a random attack, or Zakharov's remaining forces. This was something else, something worse. A cleanup operation designed to eliminate everyone involved and secure Chimera for the same shadowy elements Carter had served. "Get clear," Vanessa ordered Mike. "Circle around, link up with the Colonel. I'll handle the handoff." "At a negative," Mike responded, followed by the crack of his rifle as he engaged the attackers. "Already committed. Besides, you need the distraction." He was right. Without covering fire, she'd never make it to the boat with Chimera. The attackers had positioned specifically to cut off access to the water. Vanessa drew her sidearm and took a quick assessment. The drone was the immediate threat, a small reconnaissance model that would be relaying her position to the attack team. Without looking directly at it, she fired 3 rapid shots. The third connected, sending the drone spiraling into the water. The Coast Guard boat had maintained position about 20 yards from the dock, close enough for a desperate maneuver, but out of easy, small arms range. The officer was gesturing for her to move to the edge of the dock, preparing to make a fast approach for extraction. Mike's covering fire had forced the attackers to seek cover, giving her a narrow window of opportunity. Drawing a deep breath, Vanessa sprinted for the dock's edge. The Chimera container clutched tightly against her body. Bullets tore into the planking around her, uncomfortably accurate, despite Mike's suppressing fire. 10 yards from the edge, a round caught her in the left shoulder, spinning her, but not stopping her forward momentum. 5 yards from the edge, another grazed her thigh. Then she was airborne, diving from the dock toward the approaching boat. For a suspended moment, time seemed to slow as she sailed through the air, the container secure against her chest, blood streaming from her wounds. She hit the boat's deck hard, the impact driving the air from her lungs. The Coast Guardsmen immediately accelerated away from the dock, one providing covering fire, while the other piloted the craft toward the waiting cutter. Through the pain and adrenaline, Vanessa turned to look back at the shore. Mike was retreating in good order, using the terrain for cover as he disengaged. He would make it? He had to. She refused to accept any other outcome. As the boat reached the cutter, hands reached down to help her aboard. The Chimera container was taken immediately, secured by personnel in specialized protective equipment. A corpsman approached to treat her wounds, but Vanessa waved him off temporarily. "There's a man back there," she told the cutter's commander, a stern-faced woman with captain's insignia. "My partner, and Colonel Hargrove is nearby. They need extraction." "Already in progress," the captain replied. Admiral's orders were explicit. Secure the package and all friendly personnel. Helicopter is inbound for your colleagues. Vanessa finally allowed herself to be guided to the cutter's small medical bay, where the corpsman began treating her wounds. As the adrenaline ebbed, the pain intensified, but she remained focused on the shore, watching for any sign of Mike or the colonel. 10 minutes later, the distinctive sound of a military helicopter, a Black Hawk based on its acoustic signature, reached her ears. Through the medical bay's small window, she could see it descending toward the tree line beyond Hawkins Point. "They'll make it," the corpsman said, noticing her fixation on the helicopter. "Those birds have the best crews in the service." Vanessa nodded, wanting to believe him. The mission was nearly complete. Chimera secure Zakharov in custody, the conspiracy exposed. But until Mike and the colonel were safely aboard, nothing was finished. The corpsman had just finished bandaging her shoulder when the helicopter reappeared, ascending rapidly and banking toward the cutter. Vanessa insisted on moving to the deck, ignoring his objections about her condition. As the Black Hawk hovered alongside the cutter, she could see two figures being helped aboard by the crew, Mike apparently uninjured, and the colonel looking exhausted but very much alive. Only then did Vanessa allow herself to acknowledge the mission's success. The ghost had fulfilled her purpose. Her team was avenged, the threat neutralized, the innocent protected. For the first time in 4 years, she felt the weight of Syria lifting from her shoulders. As the cutter got underway, heading for a secure naval facility farther down the coast, Vanessa Mitchell, the ghost who had emerged from the marsh, finally allowed herself to rest. 3 weeks later, Vanessa stood on the porch of a newly rebuilt cabin at the edge of the Okefenokee Swamp, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Her shoulder was healing well, though the doctors had warned she might never regain full range of motion, a small price to pay in her estimation. The events at Hawkins Point had set in motion changes that were still reverberating through the intelligence community. Admiral Forrester, true to his word, had used the evidence they'd gathered to launch an internal investigation that reached to the highest levels. Several senior officials had resigned abruptly, others reassigned to positions far from sensitive operations. Project Chimera had been officially terminated, the biological agent secured in a maximum containment facility under joint military CDC oversight. Its existence had been documented in classified reports that would ensure no one could revive the program without leaving evidence. As for Zakharov, he had disappeared into the shadowy world of black sites and sealed indictments. The colonel had assured her that the Russian would face justice appropriate to his crimes, not the public kind, but the kind reserved for those whose offenses transcended ordinary law. The sound of tires on gravel announced visitors. Vanessa turned to see a familiar jeep approaching the colonel at the wheel, with Mike in the passenger seat. Both men looked better than when she'd last seen them at the Naval Hospital, the colonel particularly having regained much of his vigor despite his ordeal. "Admiring your handiwork," Hargrove called out as they approached the cabin, gesturing at the new construction. "Contemplating it," Vanessa replied with a small smile. "Still getting used to the idea of rebuilding rather than relocating." It had been her pattern for years: establish a position, maintain it until compromised, then abandon it for a new location. The instincts of a hunted operative were difficult to set aside. "Place looks good," Mike observed, climbing the porch steps. "Contractor did quality work." "Admiral Forrester insisted on covering the costs," the colonel explained, joining them on the porch. "Said it was the least the government could do considering." They entered the cabin together, its interior still smelling of fresh lumber and new furnishings. The layout was similar to her previous home, but with subtle improvements. Better sight lines, reinforced walls, more escape routes. Old habits died hard. Over coffee, they discussed the aftermath of what the intelligence community was now calling the Okefenokee incident, a deliberately bland designation for an operation that had exposed corruption at the highest levels. "Carter's network is being dismantled piece by piece," the colonel informed them. "Forrester's people are thorough, following every connection, every money trail. It'll take time, but they'll find everyone involved. And my team, Vanessa asked the question that had driven her for 4 years. Will they get justice? The colonel's expression softened. The official record has been amended, no longer listed as killed in a training accident, now recognized as having died in the line of duty during a classified operation. Full honors posthumously awarded. And it wasn't perfect, the full truth might never be acknowledged publicly, but it was something. Her teammates would be remembered for their sacrifice, not buried under convenient lies. What about you two? She asked, changing the subject. Back to civilian life. Mike shrugged. Admiral offered me a position with a new task force, something about vetting operations to prevent another chimera. Might be worth considering. And you, Colonel? Vanessa turned to her mentor. Hargrove smiled, a genuine expression that took years from his weathered face. Officially retired as of yesterday. 50 years serving Uncle Sam is enough for any man. He paused, his expression turning thoughtful. Though Forrester mentioned something about consulting work. Seems they need people who remember the old ways, how to operate with honor in a dishonorable world. The conversation continued as daylight faded, the cabin growing dark until Vanessa lit the lamps. It felt strange, this domestic normality, after weeks of tension and violence. Strange, but not unwelcome. As the evening progressed, a more serious topic emerged: her future. With Zakharov contained and Carter's network exposed, the immediate threats had been neutralized. For the first time since Syria, Vanessa Mitchell had choices beyond survival. The shop's still there, she mused, referring to her hunting supply store in town. Deputy Collins has been keeping an eye on it. I could reopen, continue the life I built here. Is that what you want? The colonel asked, his tone neutral, but his eyes searching. Vanessa considered the question carefully. 4 years ago, I needed to disappear, to become someone else, while I processed what happened in Syria. The shop, the quiet life, it served its purpose. And now, Mike prompted. Now I know the ghost will always be part of me, she acknowledged. Not something to bury or deny, but something to channel. The skills, the instincts, they can serve a purpose beyond vengeance. The colonel nodded approvingly. The best operators I've known understood that balance, being warriors when necessary but never losing sight of why they fight. The protection of others, not just the destruction of enemies. Forrester mentioned you as well, Mike revealed. Said there would be a place for someone with your particular skill set, if you were interested. Off the books, of course. Deniable operations, but with proper oversight this time. Vanessa wasn't surprised. The intelligence community never willingly let go of valuable assets, especially those with proven field capabilities. The offer was tempting, a return to purpose, to mission, to the world she knew best. I'll consider it, she said finally, but not right away. There are things I need to do first. The men didn't press her for details, respecting her need for personal resolution. As the evening concluded and they prepared to leave, the colonel handed her a small package wrapped in simple brown paper. Found this in a storage locker I've maintained since the Cold War, he explained. Thought you might appreciate it. Alone, after their departure, Vanessa opened the package carefully. Inside was a book, an original 1969 edition of Silent Warrior by Charles Henderson, one of the first accounts of modern snipers in combat. Tucked inside its pages was a handwritten note from the colonel. The true measure of a warrior is not how many enemies they defeat, but how many innocents they protect. The ghost has earned her rest, but should the world need her again, I have no doubt she will answer the call. With respect and pride, F.H. Vanessa closed the book, surprisingly moved by the simple gesture. The colonel understood her better than perhaps anyone alive, the burdens she carried, the code she lived by, the purpose that drove her forward. The next morning dawned clear and cool, a perfect early autumn day in the Georgia lowlands. Vanessa rose before sunrise, as she had every day of her adult life, and prepared for a journey. The grave markers were simple granite stones bearing only names, ranks, and dates arranged in perfect military alignment. Arlington National Cemetery stretched before her, a testament to American sacrifice across generations of conflict. She moved with quiet reverence between the rows until she found what she sought. The final resting places of her team. 6 stones, 6 men who had trusted her with their lives, who had fought beside her in the world's darkest corners. Vanessa knelt before them, placing a single coin on each marker. A SEAL Team 6 challenge coin identical to the one Mike had given her before her mission into the swamp. In military tradition, such coins left on graves held special significance, a message from one warrior to another that they were remembered, that their sacrifice mattered. "It's done," she said softly to the silent stones. "Carter's exposed. Zakharov's contained. The truth is known to those who need to know it." She paused, gathering herself. "I couldn't save you, but I could make sure your deaths weren't meaningless." The morning air was still the cemetery quiet, save for the distant sound of an honor guard preparing for the day's ceremonies. Vanessa remained kneeling for long minutes, saying private goodbyes to men who had been more than teammates. They had been brothers in the truest sense. When she finally rose, her expression was resolute rather than mournful. The past could not be changed, but the future remained unwritten. The ghost had fulfilled her vow of vengeance. Now Vanessa Mitchell would determine what came next. 1 week later, she reopened Mitchell's hunting supplies to the appreciative response of Folkeston's residents. The shop quickly resumed its place as a community fixture, a source of quality equipment and reliable advice for those who ventured into the swamp. To casual observers, Vanessa appeared unchanged, the same reserved but knowledgeable shopkeeper who had served the community for years. Few noticed the new security features installed throughout the building, or the secure satellite phone kept within easy reach, or the occasional visits from distinguished military officers who spoke with her in hushed tones. Fewer still would have recognized the significance of the book, now displayed in a simple frame behind the counter. Silent Warrior opened to a page bearing a handwritten note from a retired colonel. And none would have understood the meaning of the SEAL Team 6 challenge coin that never left her pocket, a reminder of promises kept and those yet to be fulfilled. Life settled into a rhythm that suited her days in the shop evenings, in her rebuilt cabin weekends spent with the colonel teaching shooting techniques to Mike and other selected students. It wasn't the life she had envisioned as a young woman entering Bud's training with dreams of serving her country, but it was a life with purpose and meaning. 3 months after the Okefenokee incident, on a crisp December morning, the bell above the shop door jingled to announce a visitor. Vanessa looked up from the inventory she was conducting to see a man in civilian clothes, but with the unmistakable bearing of military intelligence. "Ms. Mitchell," he said formally, placing a sealed folder on the counter. "Admiral Forrester sends his regards." When he had departed, Vanessa opened the folder to find operational details of a situation developing in the Caucasus Mountains, a region she knew well from previous deployments. Former Russian intelligence operatives selling advanced weapons technology to non-state actors. Potential biological components. Civilian population centers at risk. Attached was a handwritten note from Admiral Forrester. "The world still needs ghosts. Your country still needs you. But this time, you won't be alone. Your choice. JF." Vanessa studied the documents carefully, weighing the implications. The shop was doing well. The colonel and Mike were nearby. She had built something approaching a normal life. Yet, as she read the operational details, she felt the familiar focus returning, the heightened awareness, the tactical calculations, the sense of purpose that had defined her military career. The ghost stirring within her once more. That evening, as sunset painted the swamp in golden light, Vanessa stood on her porch, considering her options. The Okefenokee stretched before her, ancient and unchanging, a wilderness that had been both her hiding place and her salvation. Her decision had been made the moment she opened the folder. Some choices weren't really choices at all. They were acknowledgments of who you truly were. She reached for her phone and dialed a secure number. "This is Ghost," she said simply. "I'm in." The mission would be dangerous, the odds uncertain, the enemies formidable. But Vanessa Mitchell, the ghost who had emerged from the marsh, had never been defined by the battles she fought. She was defined by what she fought for. And that, more than anything, was worth returning to the shadows for.